circulation, then mixed circulation, incomplete circulation, and lastly the double circulation. Isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
So did you people have any doubts from the topic that we had discussed? Any doubts? Anything you want to ask?
No.
Oh, not all the students have done. So today we are going to move forward and talk about the blood pressure, then we have the blood vessels and different things that we still yet have not done. Okay, now see. First of all, remember that you remember that I said that whenever the deoxygenated blood goes to the heart or deoxygenated blood goes to the heart, it's like pumping action happens, isn't it? The auricles, they pump, the blood from them empties into the ventricle. And when the ventricles, they pump, then the blood sort of flows out to the different areas where it is supposed to go. So the contraction and the after, like for example, if the atria is pumping the blood to the ventricle, so the atria will contract, the blood will flow into the ventricle. And after that, the atria will relax, meaning the auricle will relax. So the contraction is called as a systole. Systole means contraction of the chamber. Contraction. In general, contraction of heart. And the next word is diastole. Diastole means the contraction, the relaxation of the heart. Okay, so relaxation of heart chamber. Okay, basically because the whole entire thing is being done by the chambers itself. So the relaxation and the contraction is now what we call as the systole and the diastole. Okay, so now when the heart chambers are contracting, at that point of time, it will, you can say the blood will flow, and the blood that flows, it exerts a pressure from the vessel that it flows. So the pressure exerted by the systole will be called as the systolic pressure, and the pressure exerted by the diastolic, when it gets relaxed, it will be called as the diastolic pressure. Okay, so systolic and diastolic pressure is there. After that, when you talk about human beings, so in the case of human beings, this is the normal blood pressure. That is 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury. Okay, this is read as 120 over 80 millimeters of mercury. This is how you read the blood pressure. This is the normal blood pressure of human beings, in which the numerator value, the upper value is the systolic pressure, and the lower denominator value is the diastolic pressure. Clear? So if you look at over here, the force that the blood exerts against the wall of a vessel is called as the blood pressure. This pressure is much greater in the case of arteries than in the case of veins. The pressure of the blood inside the artery during ventricular systole. Ventricular systole means when the ventricles are contracting. So we call it as the systolic pressure. And the pressure in the artery during the ventricular diastole is what we call as the relaxation. And we say that it is the diastolic pressure. Now, the normal systolic pressure is 120 millimeters of mercury, and diastolic normal pressure is 80 millimeters of mercury. Okay. Now, if the blood pressure rises above 120 over 80, okay. So, in that case, you call that condition as hypertension. So blood pressure is measured with this instrument. I think all of you, when you went to the doctor, you might have had this done, right? You people have had your BP check. So this is the machine, the manual machine that they utilize, and that is called as the sphygmomanometer. This is the name of this particular machine. Now, when the blood pressure is persistently high, you call that case as the hypertension. But why does it happen? See, for example, if there is a person that eats a lot of gunk, junk. Okay, this is the blood vessel. Okay, so when we eat a lot of junk food or a lot of processed oily kind of food, then the foods like that fat, it starts getting accumulated in the arteries like that. Okay, it's like the whole entire artery, it can get the accumulation of the cholesterol, the oil, the fat, and all of that. Okay, now what do you think? The flow of blood through this, once the gunk has been deposited, will the flow of blood be increased or be decreased?
Decrease.
Decreased. No. Have you people used that garden hose, the pipe to water the plants and stuff, right? Have you seen that when you like turn on your tap and if you just hold the pipe, the water normally flows like that, normal. But what happens when you pinch it? The flow of the water become increased or decreased?
Increased.
Increase. It increases so much that if you point it towards someone, the person can get hit with that water flow, right? So same thing is happening over here. Here, because of the deposition of all of these things internally, the surface area is getting decreased. As a result, the blood will rush through the arteries. And this is the increase in the blood pressure because rush blood flow is there, so it exerts more pressure. So that is called as hypertension. Now, the hypertension is extremely, you can see, bad for the whole entire body. What can it affect? It can affect the brain, the heart, and the kidney. So, if you want to remember what does the hypertension affect, so you can remember it like 3 BHK. 3 things: brain, heart, and kidneys. Clear? Now, the next thing is the different blood vessels that are there. Now, you know that we have arteries, we have veins, and we have capillaries, right? Now, what are the differences? Like many a times they can ask you to differentiate between arteries and veins. So when we talk about the arteries, so they are mostly thick walled. Okay, they have a thicker wall as compared to the veins. The ones that you see over here, students, what is it? Is it artery or is it vein?
Veins.
Veins. Always remember that the veins are superficially situated. They're not very deep situated. But we cannot see our artery because they are very deeply situated in our body. Now, arteries, they carry the blood away from the heart, whereas the veins, they bring the blood towards the heart. And you know that all the arteries, they are responsible for carrying the oxygenated blood, except for one, that is pulmonary artery. Whereas all the veins, it is responsible for carrying the deoxygenated blood except for one, and that is the pulmonary vein. Now, the pulmonary artery, it has a lumen that is narrow. Now, what is the meaning of narrow lumen? For example, if this is the artery that I'm talking about, okay? I have cut it in half like that, and now I'm visualizing it like this, okay? Like that. So this circular cross section that you see, that is the lumen. Okay, the space from where the things would pass through, that is the lumen area. So in the case of artery, the lumen is very narrow. It's very tiny. But in the case of veins, if you see here, compare the picture. The first case is like the white portion, it is the lumen of the artery, and see how big the lumen of the vein is. Okay, so always remember the lumen of the vein is wider, whereas the lumen of the artery is narrower. Clear? Just 1 second, students. All right. So apart from that, you can also mention that the arteries, they are deep situated. And the veins, they are superficially situated. So the difference between arteries and veins is clear. Okay. Now there comes the capillary. Now the capillaries, sort of imagine it like a junction. If you see this particular picture, the red one is your artery and it has a tinier lumen, whereas the blue one is your vein and it has a wider lumen. And the point wherein they are meeting each other, the artery, the vein, when they meet each other, this point of cross section is what you call as the capillary. So it's the place where the arteries and veins sort of connect. So when we talk about the capillaries, so these are the tiny blood vessels that connect the arteries and the veins. So any doubts in the blood vessels, students? Now, just like how in our body, we have two types of, you can say, fluid connective tissue. The first fluid connective tissue is the blood. All of us know that. But then blood is the colored, you can say, fluid in our body. Whereas the next one is the lymph, which is the colorless watery fluid. Okay. And it is present in our lymphatic system. So lymph, it is a clear watery fluid that circulates through the lymphatic system. It collects excessive fluid, it collects the waste products and even the harmful substances from the tissues, and then it sends it into the bloodstream so that it can get purified. So this is very similar to the plasma, which is the ground substance of the blood. And what happens is that this particular lymph can also be called as the, you can say, something that is derived from the interstitial fluid, and it leaks from the blood capillaries into the spaces around the cells. So it's like a colorless fluid that is present in the lymphatic system of our body. What is the function of lymph? So first of all, it is responsible for fluid balance. Okay, sort of like when it is collecting the, you can say, dirty or impure stuff and returning it to the bloodstream so that it can sort of regulate the balance of the fluid. Second, the lymph, they are very, very important for the immune function, because have you people seen that strainer that we use to strain the tea leaves in, right? Everyone has seen it at home. So if imagine lymph and the lymphatic system just like a drainage system wherein they would remove the pathogens from our body. They sort of kill the pathogen. Then the next is transport. So the lymph, they carry the white blood cells, okay, especially the lymphocytes. It carries the nutrients and other substances throughout the whole body. It is also responsible for the removal of waste. So the lymph, it collects waste products and the cellular debris. Cellular debris is like all those cells that have died and they are just present there. So it collects it and then filters it out so as to remove the waste particle. After that, you people remember in the digestion when we were talking about the absorption part, remember how the villi, they were richly supplied with blood vessels and lacteals? Remember? So these lymphs, they sort of like the vessels of the lymphatic system, they also surround the villi and they are responsible for the absorption of fat molecules. So the fat molecules, instead of being directly absorbed into our blood, it gets absorbed into the lymphatic system. Clear? And then it gets transported to the bloodstream. Any doubts? Now, one more thing, we saw that the blood has different components. It has red blood cells, white blood cells, plasma. One more thing it has is platelets. Now, in our body, platelets is the utmost defense system that if we get a cut, if we get a wound, right, we do not keep on bleeding for the rest of our life, isn't it? Our bleeding stops after a little while. And that is because of the platelets. So when we talk about the platelets, they are responsible for the clotting of blood or the coagulation of the blood. Okay, clotting, coagulation, same thing. So what it does is that wherever there is a cut, the platelets migrate to those areas and they start sort of packing the blood. Imagine them as packing it, just like that. And have you people seen that if you get a cut or a scratch, after a while, your cut has a very tiny, not tiny, you can say a thick structure formed over it that we are very tempted to scratch off. Huh? So don't scratch it off because your platelets have worked really hard to do so. You shouldn't scratch it off. So why is it there? It's sort of like a plug and that is called as a scum. Okay. And it is there so as to stop the blood from coming out of that injured area. So naturally, the loss of blood from the system, it has to be minimized or else the person can die. So because of this, the blood has the platelet cells which circulate around the body and plug these leaks by helping to clot the blood at the points of injury, and it forms a scum at that point. Okay, so scum formation takes. Is it clear, students? Any doubts? Okay. So with this, the transportation in the case of human beings, the whole entire thing that you people needed to know is completed. Anything you people want to ask? So you can ask me.
That's systole and diastole. Can you explain it again?
Which one? Systolic and diastolic.
Yeah,
See, when our heart contracts, okay, when the ventricles contract, that contraction is called as a systole. Okay, contraction or systole, same thing. Relaxation or diastole, same thing. Now the pressure that will be exerted because of the systole of the ventricle, we will call it as systolic pressure. And the pressure that will be exerted because of the relaxation or the diastole of the ventricle, we'll call it as diastolic pressure. So in our blood, we measure, like in our, you can say whenever we want to measure our blood pressure, so we measure the systolic pressure also and diastolic, because our heart is doing both the things, right? It's contracting also and it's relaxing also. So when it contracts and the pressure that we get, that is 120 millimeters of mercury, this is the systolic pressure. It is the pressure when the heart is contracting to move the blood out. So the sort of, you can say, push the blood out, right? And then when the heart, after contracting, it relaxes, it goes back to the normal state. So we call it as the diastole. So imagine there will be a difference in the pressure, one where you're pushing something and one where you're not. So the diastolic pressure is less than the systolic pressure, and it is 80 millimeters of mercury. Clear?
yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now see, there are some questions also. Let us do it one by one. So first, what is the meaning of oxygenation? Who can tell me? What do you mean by oxygenation?
The purification of oxygen.
No, not purification of oxygen. Oxygen itself is pure. The purification of the impure blood, deoxygenated blood, when the CO2 is taken out of it, O2 is given into it, that is oxygenation. Can someone tell me where does it happen? Where does the process of oxygenation happen?
Lung.
Lungs. It happens in the lungs. Okay. Okay. What is lymph?
Lymph is a colorless substance which is transmitted in the lymphatic system.
Hmm.
It carries waste materials and excess fluid. It
Hmm.
helps in the balance of fluid. It also gives immunity by sending off the
It
dead
kills off the pathogen. Right. Very good.
pathogens.
It is a colorless watery fluid. Always mention this. Okay. It's colorless. It has no color. Hmm. Okay. What is a sphygmomanometer?
It is
The
the device
manual
used to measure blood pressure.
Very good. And I don't know what I was writing. Explain why. Nothing else. So explain why, students. Okay. Wait. Explain why people get hypertension. Explain why people can get hypertension.
cause eating too much of junk food and fat deposits in the blood vessels.
Yes, exactly. Very good. Okay, so this transportation of humans is clear to everyone. I hope there are no doubts. All right, now we are going to talk
No.
about the transportation in the case of plants. Now, plants, they are not like us at all, right? Oh, where did my screen go? Can you see the screen through it? So we're going to talk about the transportation in the case of plants. Now the thing with plants is that they do not have a proper, you can say, circulatory system or a transportation system just like us. They do not have that, right? And in the case of plants, like for example, our body, we take stuff from the outside, we eat and we get the nutrition and everything, right? Water also we drink and we get the hydration. But in the case of plants, most of the minerals or nutrients or the water they require, it's present in the soil. So for the plants, the soil is the reservoir. It's like a storehouse of all the raw materials that the plants will be needing, such as nitrogen, phosphorus, sulfur, carbon, variety of them are there, right? Now, in the soil, the plant can't just bend and put a hand in the soil and take all of that. So that's not possible. So the plants have roots for that, right? The roots are the structures of the plants that are present below the level of the soil. And they are very, very important for the uptake of all the minerals and the nutrients from the soil. Now, remember that if we are talking about a very small distance, so for small distance, diffusion of stuff would be more than enough, right? Diffusion. Can someone quickly give me the definition of diffusion?
Particles going from higher concentration to lower concentration.
Yeah. So the movement of particles from a higher concentration to the lower concentration. Always remember, diffusion is like you can say sufficient for shorter distances. But if the plant body is longer, like the plant is taller, right? Like in the case of trees. So diffusion will not be enough to meet the requirements of the plants. So for larger or longer distances, proper transportation system is very, very important. One more thing is that since the plants, they are immobile, right? They cannot move from one place to another. So they have a lot of dead cells in there. Now see, if in us animals or humans, if we have any dead cell in our body, it will be useless to us. It won't be of any use to us. But the plants, when they have the dead cells in them, so those dead cells, they have a purpose. What is the purpose? It provides the mechanical support and strength to the plant. Okay. So now for the conduction purpose, for the transportation purpose, in the case of plants, there are two conducting tissues. Who remembers the nature of xylem and phloem from class 9? Which type of tissues are there? What is, anything you remember about them? Very proudly, no? See, xylem and phloem, they are called as the conducting tissues, or you can call them as the vascular tissues. Okay, they are the vascular tissues and they are the complex permanent tissues. Remember complex permanent, simple permanent, complex permanent. No? Now we have moved forward. Why should we remember class 9? See, the complex tissues means that they are made up of more than one type of components, and permanent means that they will not divide any. So xylem is responsible for the transportation of water, whereas the phloem, it is responsible for the transportation of food substance. So first we will see how the transportation of water takes place. So it takes place with the help of xylem. Now the xylem is made up of 4 components. Okay. Tracheids, vessels, xylem parenchyma, and xylem fibers. Each of them have their own particular function to perform. For example, if you think about tracheids and vessels, they form sort of like a water column. It forms like a pathway from where the water would be sort of traveling. Okay, so that is the function of tracheids and vessels. The parenchyma tissue, it is responsible for the storage purpose. Xylem parenchyma will also be responsible for storage. And the fiber, always remember, have you seen that coconut that has a husk on it? the brown husky coconut. So that husk is a dead fiber. It's a fiber. So they always remember whenever you hear fiber, remember that it is a dead tissue. But since it is dead, it's not useless to the plants. It is useful. In fact, what does it do? It provides the mechanical strength and support. Okay. So when we talk about the tracheates, so they are elongated tube-like cells that have tapered end. Tapered end means these pointy ends like that. Okay, their ends are pointed and they sort of help in the water transport, facilitate in the water transport. Vessels, on the other hand, they are longer and they are cylindrical cells, okay, that form continuous tubes and they help in the water transportation. They form a tube so that the water could flow through them. The xylem parenchyma, they're responsible for storage. Now remember, the parenchyma, wherever it will be present, it will be a living tissue. Tracheates and vessels are also living tissues, but fiber is not. So the xylem parenchyma, it is responsible for the storage of starch and fats, and it helps in short distance water conduction. Then comes xylem fibers. These are the dead cells and they will be providing the mechanical strength, the mechanical support to the plant. Now in the xylem tissues, the vessels and tracheates, and remember that these like vessels and tracheates, they are present in most of the parts of the plant, like roots, stems, leaves. These all plants have their own vessels and tracheates. And the thing is that all of them are interconnected. So they form a continuous channel. It's like they are interconnected. So when water will come, it will be distributed to all of them. Okay. Now remember that transportation I will teach. Transportation is of two types depending upon whether ATP is required or not. For example, tell me students, if you are on top of the mountain and you want to come down, one case. If you are at the bottom of the mountain and you want to go up, which one is difficult? The first situation or the second?
Second.
Second one, everyone agrees, right? So it is difficult to go from the low to the high and it is easier to come from the high to the low, right? So passive transport is the kind of transport that happens along the concentration gradient, meaning it will happen from the higher concentration to the lower concentration. And here, no ATP expenditure will be required. No ATP spending will be required. Because it's happening along the gradient. Imagine running from the mountain top. So you don't even have to run. You automatically run on your own without having to actually run. So imagine it like that. It requires no ATP spending. Whereas when we talk about the active transport, so this is the one which happens from the low to the high concentration. It's like against the gradient. So here ATP will be utilized. Clear? This much you've understood? Acha. Apart from this, do you people remember that in class 9th, in cell chapter, you people might have studied something about solute, solvent? Ringing a bell? So see, the thing is that whenever the solute is high, the solvent is low. And whenever the solvent is high, the solute is low. Okay. And with that being said, we'll come over here. See. So let us see how the water gets transported by the xylem. First of all, the roots, they are going to take up the ions from the soil actively. Okay. They will actively transport the ions into them. Okay. Active transport means they will spend the energy and then they will take up the ion. Now, once the ion comes into the root, the concentration of the solute increases because ions are solutes only, right? It is going to increase and the water is decreased, it's less. So this creates a gradient, isn't it? Now, as a result of this gradient, the water from the soil, because it is higher in the soil, lower in the root. So water from the soil, it will move towards the roots. And what is the movement of water called as? Osmosis. So the osmosis of the water will happen, as a result of which the water is now finally into the roots. Now remember that the transportation that happens via xylem, it always happens in one direction. That is from the roots to the different parts of the plant. Is there any part of the plant that can absorb water other than roots? Or is there any source of water from where the water could be absorbed? It's not there. The source of water is present in the soil itself, right? So the plants, they're going to absorb the water from the soil and it will be unidirectional, meaning in one direction, that is from the roots to the different parts, always upright, never from the top to bottom. The second thing is transpiration and absorption. Now, transpiration, it's like, you know that in the plants, there is the presence of stomata. So, stomata is like a pore that is open throughout the day. So, transpiration, it is the loss of water from the plant's body in the form of water vapor. Okay, it takes place through the stomata or those parts of the plant that are exposed to the sunlight, like the stem, the leaves, the parts of the plant that are in direct contact with the sunlight. So from those stomata that are present, the water molecule will be lost in the form of water vapor. So this evaporatory loss of water is what you call as transpiration. Now imagine this is a plant, okay? This is the root area of the plant and this is the stem area, the leaves area of the plant. Okay. So if the water is being lost from this area, so like imagine something is being pulled out from this area and now the plant will require to absorb more water, isn't it? Because what will happen if the plant doesn't absorb water or doesn't have water? Tell me. What will happen if the plant doesn't have water?
It will
Will
die.
die.
It will die, or you might have seen it will go wilt. Plant was like that, then it will slowly go like that, isn't it? And but you reapply the water, the plant goes back up. So this transpiration, like the water is being lost from the stems or the leaves, and this constantly create a pull so that the water could be absorbed from the soil as well. So this evaporatory loss of water, it creates a suction, sort of like how you drink through a straw, you create suction. Same way, the suction is created because of the loss of water, and this pulls the water from the soil to the roots. Clear? And this kind of pull is called as transpirational pull. Okay. Now, if I'm saying that transpiration, it's like the loss of water from the plant's body, do you think it's a good thing or it's a bad thing? Like the loss that is happening from the plant's body, do you think it is a good thing or a bad?
Good,
Good thing. Why? Why is it good? You have to
because
explain.
it cools the environment.
It cools the environment. Not necessarily. It doesn't cool the environment as such. When you might have felt when the humidity increases, that is like also because of the transpiration. So it doesn't cool the environment, but it is the bad thing in one way. But it is the bad thing that is important for the plant. Why? Because when the water loss happens, the plant requires more water, and in that way the plant absorbs more water. So it's the necessary evil. Even though it is bad, but still it is required. It is the necessary evil. Clear? Let us see the importance of transpiration. Firstly, it helps in the absorption of water. Since it creates a pull, so it will help in the upward movement of water. Then it cools the surface of the plant. Right now it cools for the plant, not for us. But just like how we have sweating, like we sweat, and that is our body's mechanism to keep us cool. Same way, the transpiration, it performs the temperature regulation in the case of plants. So it cools down the plant surface, and it is the major driving force in the movement of water in the xylem. Because if the transpiration will not happen, the water molecule will not move that much. Clear? So it's the bad thing that is required. Okay. So this was how the transpiration happens through the xylem. Sorry, no, the transportation happens through the xylem, and that is the transportation of water molecule. After that, there comes the transportation of food and other substances. So when we talk about the transportation of food, so here the food of the plant is glucose. All of you know that, right? At the end of that, the end product is the glucose molecule. Now this glucose molecule, it has to be transported throughout the whole entire plant, wherever it would be required. And this transportation of the food is called as translocation. And it takes place by the conducting tissue called as the phloem. So apart from the glucose molecule, the phloem also transports the amino acids, and the phloem is also made up of 4 compounds or components: sieve tubes, companion cells, phloem fibers, and phloem parenchyma. Now see, sieve tubes, remember one quality about the sieve tubes, that they do not have a nucleus of their own. They are dependent on the companion cells. Now the movement that happens through the phloem, it's bidirectional, meaning it can go from like top to bottom and bottom to top also, both the ways. So unlike the transportation of xylem, here the phloem transportation requires ATP, and what happens is that wherever there will be requirement of the food in the plant's body, there it will be transported. So if you see this picture here, how in the first one, when we're talking about the xylem transport, only single arrow is shown and it's going upwards from the soil to the different parts. But in the in the phloem, you see it's coming from top to bottom as well as from bottom to the top, isn't it? Like that it happens, isn't it? So always remember, the transportation through the phloem, it is bidirectional, and the transportation to the xylem, like through the xylem, it is unidirectional. Okay. Any doubts?
No.
So with this, the transportation in the plants is done, completed. So now can you tell me what are the components of the transport system in highly organized plants?
Xylem and phloem.
Xylem and phloem. What are the other names of xylem and phloem? Conducting tissues, vascular tissues, complex permanent tissues, you can call them all of them. Now, the water and minerals, they are transported by
Xylem.
xylem, and the food is transported in the plants by
Phloem.
phloem. Okay. All right. Now you people can note this part down. The transportation in humans PDF, I will send it to you. Okay. The PDF I will send. This part you write.
The last thing we wrote is deoxygenation of blood.
Deoxygenate. Okay. So either you can like leave some pages so that when I send you the PDF, you can note it down. Because now I think in the chapter only 2 topics are left. We have the excretion in animals and the excretion in plants. That is all. We are almost through. So you people write this part. The PDF of that part I will send. Okay.
Like how many pages to leave, ma'am?
How many pages to leave? I can't say that. Leave five pages, more than enough. Like both the sides, 5.
Ma'am, can you scroll down?
Yes, all of you are done, students. Shall I scroll?
Yes, ma'am.
Done, students? Also, one more thing, students, I have sent the notes. Okay. So you kindly receive it and see if it's working for you. And you can like then
Can I
copy
scroll
down
down?
the
Scroll down.
Okay. All right. So, yeah. So once you people get the notes, okay, do one thing that you copy those notes down in your notebook. You do not need to take out the printouts and stuff. Just copy it down. And in the next class, we'll be beginning with the excretion part of the chapter, which is technically the last topic.